1.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We remember the glory, the footprints in the dust, the victory of a nation. But in the autumn of 1957, America wasn't winning. We were terrified, and the sky was no longer ours. October 4th, 1957, a Friday night in America. Most people were listening to sports and music, but if you tuned your radio to 20 megahertz, you heard this. It sounded like a toy, a rhythmic metallic heartbeat. But to the Pentagon, it was the sound of a nightmare, because if the Soviet Union could put a silver ball into orbit, they could put a hydrogen bomb over Washington. The United States wasn't just losing a race. They haven't even reached the starting line. This wasn't just a battle of ideologies. It was a duel between two men, one a ghost, the other a celebrity, fighting to conquer the most hostile environment known to man. This is the story of how humanity turned the ultimate weapon into the ultimate vehicle for discovery. This is the space race. April 12th, 1961. Yuri Gagarin didn't just orbit the Earth, he claimed it for the proletariat. While America was still struggling to get a rocket off the pad without it turning into a fireball, the Soviet Union, they were already picking out the furniture for their moon lander. Inside a pressurized sphere, barely 2 meters wide, Gagarin was a passenger in a machine he wasn't allowed to touch. The controls were locked with a secret code because no one knew if a human mind could survive the isolation of the stars.
To go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.
The United States realized they couldn't win the sprint, so they changed the distance. JFK's promise was a massive political gamble. At the time, NASA didn't have the rocket, the math, or the technology. Essentially, they're promising to build a bridge while jumping off the cliff. Enter Project Gemini, the most underrated era of spaceflight. To reach the moon, NASA had to master 3 things: staying alive for weeks, meeting another ship in the dark, and finally, stepping outside. Gemini was the bridge. It was the grueling 2-year crash course where NASA learned how to actually live in the void. Before Apollo could land on the moon, Gemini had to prove we could survive the journey. 10 missions, 20 months, no room for error, and no time to breathe. At this point, we weren't just flying rockets anymore. We were mastering orbital mechanics. On Gemini 4, Ed White stepped into the void. He loved it so much, he refused to come back in, calling it the saddest moment of his life when he finally did. For a brief moment, the Cold War dread vanished, replaced by pure, silent joy. January 27th, 1967. The space race didn't just stall, it broke. A flash fire during a routine plugs-out test killed Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee in seconds. NASA wasn't just grieving, they were being interrogated by Congress. The dream was one mistake away from being canceled. The next 18 months were the most intense in NASA's history. They redesigned 1,300 items. They replaced the pure oxygen atmosphere. They built a quick-release hatch. This wasn't just engineering, it was penance. They were building a machine that couldn't afford to fail again. While the capsule was being rebuilt, the monster was being born. The Saturn V. 5 F1 engines consuming 15 tons of fuel every single second. It remains one of the loudest, most powerful machines ever built. If it exploded on the pad, it would have the force of a small nuclear tactical strike. By late 1968, the 1970 deadline wasn't a goal anymore. It was a threat. The Soviets were circling. Apollo 1 had cost them a year. If they were going to win, they couldn't afford another test. They had to go now. Late 1968, CIA intelligence reports a massive Soviet rocket, the N-1, is on the pad. The rumors are clear. The Kremlin's preparing a lunar flyby for New Year's. NASA faces a choice that would be unthinkable today. Send the next crewed mission straight to the moon, or lose the race forever. In a move that would be political suicide today, NASA took the very next crewed Saturn V and sent it to the moon, skipping the lunar module test entirely. If the single engine in the command module failed to ignite, they were trapped in the dark, forever. What they found on Christmas Eve wasn't a battleground, but a fragile, lonely blue marble. In a year of chaos on Earth, Apollo 8 saved 1968. It bought time, but the landing, that remained impossible. Apollo 8 reached the lunar far side. For the first time, human eyes looked back and saw the Earth, not as a map, but as a gentle blue marble in a dead void. In a year of war and riots on the ground, space had suddenly given humanity a reason to look up.
We are now approaching lunar sunrise, and for all the people back on Earth, the crew of Apollo 8 has a message that we would like to send to you. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light.
By July 1969, the Apollo 11 mission had a face. Neil Armstrong, the ice-cold test pilot, Buzz Aldrin, the Dr. Rendezvous of the Gemini program, and Michael Collins, the man who would have to wait in the silence of lunar orbit while his friends made history. They weren't just pilots. They were the final calculation in a decade-long equation. The vehicle beneath them was a 3,000-ton tower of kerosene and liquid oxygen. 6 million pounds of potential energy held together by 5 million parts, each built by the lowest bidder. NASA's math said there was a 50-50 chance they wouldn't come back. Meanwhile, the N-1 was on the Soviet pad. Then there was the Eagle, a spacecraft so fragile that its outer skin was thinner than 2 sheets of kitchen foil. It was never meant to fly in an atmosphere. It was a paper-thin lifeboat built for a world with no air, no room for error, and no second chances. At 100 miles above the lunar surface, the umbilical was cut, and the Eagle was on its own. And that's when the computer, the brain of the entire mission, began to fail. July 20th, 1969. The Eagle is descending, but the computer is screaming. A 1202 alarm. An unproven machine flying on an overwhelmed processor over a field of boulders. Armstrong takes manual control. They are down to 1 minute of fuel. The engines are pushing dust, blinding their view.
60 seconds. Lights on. Down 2.5. Forward. Forward. 40 feet down 2.5. Picking up some dust. 4 forward. 4 forward. Drift into the right a little. Good. Okay. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. We copy you down, Eagle. Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
12 years, hundreds of billions of dollars. And now, just silence. The ultimate prestige was won by a generation who built a bridge to heaven just to prove they could. For one fleeting moment, humanity was unified. In a race born of dread and Cold War terror, we proved that when we are pushed to the brink, we do not fall. We learn to fly. The space race was a 12-year gamble. We won the prestige, but we discovered ourselves. And that is why we go, to prove that the impossible is just a place we haven't reached yet. We poured out our souls, the blood that was spilled, the sweat that was evaporated, the tears that were shed for the ones who didn't come home. They were the fuel. We weren't just stepping onto a dead world. We were taking back the future. We were proving that humanity is only defined by where we haven't gone yet. They are the legacy. The impossible is just a place we haven't reached. And we just proved we are very good at reaching. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed that video, like and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next one. Huge shout out to my brother Juno Bass, who produced the entire soundtrack for this video. He took an immense amount of effort and did an amazing job, and I would highly suggest if any of you guys are new content creators, reach out to him. He'd be willing to do it in an instant. Thanks again to my brother for the soundtrack.